the problem is not in terms of reaching our limits and going too far. Often the problem is not even hitting our limit, right? These sort of self-defeating behaviors, these sort of, we'll say deceiving yourself to believe that your limit is somewhere when really it's a lot higher and you just don't even know how high you could go. And one of the we'll say practical wisdom that I could give here, and this was something that Jordan Peterson talked about. He said very simply, you don't know how far your limits are until you reach the limit. So if if you're not going to reach your limit, then you're never going to know how far you could go, and you're always going to live with some form of probably regret. So the idea is, well, if you really want to reach your limit, you probably have to go past it first. And he recommended that's what you do in your 20s, and that's what college life and your beginning work life is for. One of the biggest regrets of people in their 30s, this is something you might find interesting. One of the biggest regrets of people in their 30s is that they didn't work hard enough in their 20s. Valid, right? And what they're really saying is, I never reach my limits. I never push past.
Yeah, and this relates to the other topic that I've done a lot of work on, which is that self-handicapping, which is this idea that sometimes people seem to erect obstacles in their lives, but they do that with the express purpose of being able to have excuses to be able to blame any failures or lack of reaching those goals upon. And so I think we all know people like that. I mean, it isn't something that everybody does, but it's certainly something I think that everybody can relate to, is know people who seem to always have excuses for why they were never able to do certain things, why they achieve. So they may express those regrets, but it's like the regrets aren't something that they take credit for. It's more like these things prevented them from doing it.
Mm,
So the guy that wrote the original paper in self-handicapping always used a quote out of a famous Marlon Brando movie. I think it was called On the Waterfront, where he said, "I could have been a contender. I could have been, but he wasn't, right?" And so the thing is, many of us would see that as, well, you should have been one, right? But it's more the thing of, you know, these things prevented me from doing it, and so life was kind of unfair to me, or these other things kind of got in the way of that and stuff, but I could have been so much better. And so we talk about regret as being a negative thing, but in some ways with self-handicappers, that regret is something they can hold on to as
mm,
being like
an excuse.
their potential is still there, and if they believe in that potential, right, I still have that to hold on to,
Um,
right? And that's an interesting thing. We would think, and again, that's why there's such a strong, we find a big individual difference. For some people, that is, it makes no sense. They don't even understand a handicapper. It's like, why would you ever do that? Why, I don't want to have those regrets. I don't want to think about potential. I want to just do things, right? I want to accomplish. But for a handicapper, it's really one of those things where their self-esteem is wrapped up in that idea of, I have potential more than my performance has shown. And so that they can hold on to that, and that can maintain, I would still say it's a pretty fragile self-esteem, but it is still this belief that I can have I could have accomplished way more than I have. So I feel some semblance of self-integrity from that.
is that what you guys actually found experimentally? Like, you found that people self-handicap because they want to have excuses?
Right. In
Really?
other words, it's like, before the event happens, I will take advantage of something that I know will be a reasonable excuse of why I might not do well, so that I have something to blame it on. Like, I'm
Wow.
afraid I'm not going to do well. I want to have an excuse in place so that I can blame my failure not on the fact that I'm not capable, but really that this other thing was what
Wow.
prevented me from doing
So,
it. And so
so
again, what's so interesting to me about it is just how, for some people, that would never ever even entertain in their mind. Like, why would somebody do that?
place an
And
obstacle. Yeah.
but I think for some people, the fear of failure and the concern about what the implications of failure are so great that when they feel like they can't control it themselves, they gotta come up with an excuse that they think is believable, so that they can hold on to the fact that even
Wow.
if I don't do well, I've got an excuse in place that says I could have done well if only.
That's so counterintuitive. That's
Isn't
so
it?
counterintuitive. Because what I would normally think is I try as hard as I can,
Right.
make a mistake, and then look back and say, okay, there were three things that were out of my control. So I'm going to use these three as my excuse. But what you're saying is, I don't try as hard as I possibly could, be knowing that if I tried as hard as I possibly could, then I can't come up with a good excuse. So it's a like it actually the self handicapping actually influences the performance.
Yep.
Wow.
So the most telling thing that there were a lot of studies showing that people do certain things that seem like self-sabotage before they actually perform things, and then that they don't seem as depressed about failing because they have an excuse in place. Whereas if they tried their best, so we literally did a study with people that were identified as people who are more likely or less likely to handicap, and asked them, would you, which of these situations would bother you more? I tried my best and I didn't do well,
Mhm.
or I didn't try my best and as a result I didn't do well. And so for people who are non-handicappers, they're like, of course I want to always feel like I did my best, right? If I didn't try my best and I failed, I'd be so upset with myself, right? I mean, that I don't ever want to have that experience. So I will always try my best because at least I can take satisfaction that I tried my best, right?
Yeah, yeah.
For a handicapper, they literally say, I do not want to ever put myself in the situation where I tried my best and fail.
Really?
I want to be in a situation where I have that excuse, where like the worst thing for me would be if I tried my best and failed, because that basically says I am incapable.
Wow.
I don't have the ability. And so to actually have people who say, that's what I want, versus other people saying, like, I would never do that. It was like, oh my God. And as you said, for those of us who aren't handicappers, it just doesn't compute. It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense. Like, why would you ever do that? But it's just that I think for some people, the fear of failure and the implications of failure are so powerful that they just do not want to put themselves in a situation where they literally know that they fail. And I think one of the things we talked about, that sort of fixed versus growth mindset, is that almost what self-handicapping requires is you have to have the fixed mindset.
Yeah.
Because at some level you have to believe that if you failed, it would say you're incapable, and then I'm an incompetent person, and what will that say about me? It's
Yeah.
not like, oh, I could always get better. No, it's like, no, I would find out I'm not good, and then that would be devastating.
Wow. I notice that all the time. Like as you're speaking it, like I notice there are people in my life who they'll literally say like, you know, before an event, they'll be like, yeah, I'm not gonna try as hard. Or like you could tell they're not trying as hard as they possibly could for that, and you could tell it's for that exact reason. They know because if they fail, if they lose, they could just say, well, I didn't try. So there.
Yeah, what's been fun for us is that to think about the range of different situations where this happens, because initially people were doing it all with like testing and academic settings, because it's just where we're at, we're at university studying this and stuff, and so it's like things people don't do before a test, right? I mean, they'll go out drinking, or they'll blow off, they'll not show up to class and miss the lectures right before the test when they're doing like the review sessions and stuff like that. And it's like, this would help to do this and like to miss those, and then be able to say, oh yeah, well, I would have done fine if only I'd done. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
why didn't you do them? I mean, really, I mean, again, I mean, not the only reasons people miss it aren't always self-handicapping, but at least that can be something that people do on purpose to be able to make that happen. But you think like in interviews, like people who don't really try their best during an interview, or even like potential dates and stuff, where they're like, I'm so afraid that they'll reject me, so I'll just make sure it doesn't go well so that I can blame it on other things instead of me. And it's like, yeah, it happened. Or people that don't think they're going to make the team in athletics and stuff, and so they don't really put forth their best effort and like do the right things that they need to do to come in really prepared for the tryouts or other kinds of things. It's like,
Wow.
wonder whether a lot of that is
Yeah.
self-handicapping. And so that's where it's fun to study, just because it's so, I think there's many contexts where we see it. But the thing is, it's hard to sort of say. Sometimes people fail for all kinds of reasons, and some of it's on purpose and some of it's not. So how do you separate out ones where people really consciously kind of set this up versus things do happen, where people can't do those things and
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Like you're
So
asking all the time. Like
how you handle it after the fact is the key, right? Do you sort of use it as this excuse versus
yeah.
not? I think is pretty telling.
Yeah, no, I think huh. That's really funny. Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, somebody who goes and drinks the night before an exam, right? You ask the question: is it because of self-handicapping, or is it just because they like to party, right?
Right.
Like
Exactly.
it's such a valid question, and
Exactly.
it's very difficult to parse out.